For tonight, I am Willie Mae Ward, and we do have, 1 minute to be exact. So I just had a couple of people signing in, so I'm gonna let them come on in and take a seat, and then we're gonna begin the program. How about that? First of all, I do wanna say thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule and this weather that we have going on. You can't get too many people to come out when it's raining, but I thank you all for taking time out to come and make this program the success that it is and that it's going to be. I do thank Dr. Faluso, that I mess up your name, charge it to the head and not the heart, so I can say Dr. F. And thank you, because I know being a doctor is not easy. You have a busy schedule, and I was really trying, this is something we do every year, and I was really trying to get a doctor in here to really speak to us and let us know what we're doing wrong and what we need to do right, what we need to correct, what we need to change, and all that good stuff. And I know starting with one thing, weight management probably, and good eating habits as well. So enough of that. Excuse me. I am, as I mentioned, I'm your host. I'm Willie Mae Ward, and next on program will be greetings from Deacon James Moore, and I call her Nurse Amy. I didn't get her last name, but you know who she is. Nurse Amy gonna come and introduce our speaker for this evening, and then I'll come back with remarks and probably Deacon Moore as well. And then we're gonna adjourn and have refreshments. So it's not a long program, but I do want to give the doctor enough time to do his presentation, and we have a Q&A session or question and answer session, okay? That's all right with you all? Before everyone leaves, I'm talking about the guest. The nurse brought some goodies for us, so don't leave without getting a card and a bracelet and whatever else that might be on the table, okay? All right, thank you for your attention. Let's pay attention. Take you some good notes. And if you start having some problems, go see Dr. Faluso. I'm not going to bother with the last name. Come on. Deacon James Moore. Let's say amen for him.
Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? Greetings to each of you, all of you, from Pastor Lamont Moore and the LOTV church family. We just want to thank you all for coming out tonight and participating in our church urban initiative, Heart Awareness. We have 5 components in our church urban initiative, and they are education, crime prevention, economic development, financial literacy, and family, which is what we got going on tonight. And it's about healthy living. So many different things that fall upon the family, and healthy living is one of them. Thank y'all. Next we have the nurse name.
Can everybody hear me? I'm not very good at these microphones. In October of 2015, Dr. Faluso came to the Mississippi Delta. He came without a hospital backing. He came without knowing a single soul in Mississippi. But he chose to come here because of the health disparity and such as the epicenter for peripheral arterial disease, cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, diabetes, and he wanted to make a difference. So he came, and almost 5 years later, we are stationed in Cleveland, Mississippi. We see about 100 patients a day that come through our center, and we welcome everybody. You do not need a referral unless your insurance mandates it. So if you're having chest pain, leg pain, any hypertension, come see us. We welcome you all. We have Dr. Peck, will you speak?
All right. Thank you, Amy. Good evening, church family. Thank you to our gracious host. I'd like to thank the Lily of the Valley family and Miss Ward. Where's Miss Ward? Where is she? There you go. I'd also like to thank Deacon Moore for that great introduction. Where two or three gathered, he's in our midst. So we thank God for safe journey mercies this evening for us to come and hear the word of making our hearts right so we can live right and do right by Him and everything else, right? What is paramount is that I really don't care about how many people are gathered when it comes to all these talks. I've given talks in different settings to a room of 1,000 people versus a room of 5 people. The key is that you take one or two salient points out of the talk and you see how you can make it applicable to your lives. But also be disciplined in applying it to your lives, because that's the key. Y'all are gonna hear some things that you've heard before, but some of the things that you can take and apply to your lives and just be disciplined. You know, we always complain about things about we don't have enough time, and others though, we're not disciplined to follow through. So if you can just pick one salient point, one important point that you hear tonight, that makes this all worth it. So why did I move to Mississippi? As Amy stated, Mississippi is ranked #1 in every bad heart and vascular outcome and risk factor that there is, either 1 or 2 since the early 1990s till now. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of positive trajectory in reducing all these bad outcomes when it comes to infant mortality, when it comes to maternal birth rates and death rates, when it comes to heart attack rates, amputation rates, when it also comes to patients who end up on dialysis and patients who have diabetes and have obesity. If you look at Highway 61 and all its associated crossroads, these areas in the Delta make up majority of these patients that have adverse outcomes. 2/3 of all the deaths from heart and vascular diseases in America occur in low-income and middle-income communities. Mississippi happens to be the poorest state in America. So we have 1 in 3 deaths in women every day, and every 40 seconds a life is lost due to cardiovascular disease. That's why we're here. We're here to figure out why. And we're trying to see how it impacts not only the person sitting to your left, to your right, but it's going to impact every single one in this room. Every single thing I talk about will impact every single person in this room, regardless of your skin, your age, your color, your background. As long as you're affiliated with this state and we live here, we are all invested in what I call the Human Development Index. We talked about economic empowerment, education, the literacy level at different rates impacts our health outcomes. Economics impacts our health outcomes. So we're all tied in, and all these things like the systems in our body have to work in concert together to have a good outcome. So when I do these talks, I like to define what cardiovascular disease is first, get some of the misconceptions out of the way, and then dive into some of the things that we can do to change our health trajectory as we move forward. So cardiovascular disease is a constellation and a sum of multiple disease states. Anyone in this room who has any of the following or knows a family member that has any of the following, please raise your hand. 1, anyone who has a family member or knows anyone who's had fluid around their heart, known as congestive heart failure, raise your hand. 2, keep your hands up. Anyone who has had a heart attack or knows a family member who's had a heart attack. Anyone who has had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. Anyone who has a family member who's had an amputation or loss of a toe. Anyone who's had an irregular heart rhythm or has a family that has irregular heart rhythm. Atrial fibrillation, ventricular tachycardia, supraventricular tachycardia. anyone who has congenital heart disease or murmur that they were born with. And then people who've had a history of clot in their lungs or poor circulation in their lower extremities or vein disease, venous insufficiency, where you have varicose veins. A combination of all those things that I've just mentioned, in addition to metabolic syndrome, which has to do with obesity, makes up cardiovascular disease. So 1 in 3 people die from cardiovascular disease, all right? And the reason is why. So we're talking about things that are reversible and things that are non-reversible. And I did that intro on, the back of the podium. I don't like that. I get comfortable like just walking back and forth. The number one reason why we have these disease states is because we have things that are modifiable and things that are non-modifiable. You and I cannot change the economic powers of the parents we were born into, if they were rich or poor. We were just born into that household, right? We cannot change the skin color that we were born. If you were black, or if you were white, Asian, Hispanic, you can't change that. You can't change your sex if you're a male or female. Father time is undefeated. Age, you cannot change that, all right? So those are things that are non-modifiable. So let's talk about modifiable risks, meaning what you and I can do to change things. One is the rate in which we build up plaque and cholesterol in all our vessels in our body is known as atherosclerosis, okay? So when you're born with the clean pipes. Your vessels are clean, all your arteries are clean, just like your kitchen sink on day one. Then you start building up all the stuff, you start cooking and washing dishes and putting stuff down the drain. Well, in your body, you start ingesting all these sweets and sugar and fatty foods and oil, and we start building these yellow substances called cholesterol plaques. All right, and then we start getting older, and calcium starts getting added to that. And as you can tell, it narrows the blood vessel in your arteries. All right. Once this narrows, it reduces oxygen-rich blood flow going to any of your vital organs. Now, if this happens in the arteries going to your brain, what do? You get a stroke. All right? If it happens to any of your organs going to your heart, you get a heart attack. And if that happens to any of your organs going to your kidneys, you get kidney disease, and to your legs, you get poor circulation. Most people in this room have heard of heart attacks, strokes. Most people have not heard of peripheral artery disease, which is poor circulation to your legs. The same process. But y'all haven't heard of that. It's interesting. Why? Because most people think 1 in 3 people die of heart attacks. That's what most people think of. So they think that 800,000 people die every year from just heart attacks. No, they die from cardiovascular disease, a summation of all those things I've just talked about. All right? So if your family member has had a stroke or heart attack or coronary artery disease or a blockage in their heart or in their neck, they should get screened for blockages in their legs. Here's an interesting fact. 20 million people have peripheral arterial disease, poor circulation in their legs. About 16 million people have coronary artery disease. And not as much in terms of how many people have strokes every year. But more people are fearful of a stroke or death over losing their toes or their limbs. It's interesting. 90% of all the amputations can be prevented if they're screened on time and treated on time. Majority of these patients have the same risk factors that cause their heart attacks. So what are these risk factors? Age. We get older, we build up plaque, as I showed y'all. Diabetes, sugar. Anyone who got the sugar or the pre-sugar or pre-diabetes, that increases your rate of plaque buildup by 3 to 4 times faster than someone who does not have it. Another thing that we see is patients who have high blood pressure. High blood pressure increases your plaque rate by twice. You actually decrease your rate of heart attack and death by 30 to 50% if you decrease your blood pressure points by 10 points. So if you go from a blood pressure of 140, top number, to 130, you decrease your rate of cardiovascular death by 30 to 50%. Those little nuggets are things you should remember. Just 10 points, all right? And then you think of patients who have high cholesterol. Well, high cholesterol has to do with our diet and our lifestyle, and what we do, what we eat, if we exercise or not exercise. The number one preventable cause of death in America is our diet. Dietary risks. What we ingest and what we put into our bodies every day. And the number one diet that I can sit up here, or stand up here rather, and recommend to y'all this evening is called the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet, write it down. That is a diet that my governing body, which is the Association of Cardiology and Association of Heart Associations, that is what we can recommend for patients. Something that is rich in, plant-based products, fish, poultry, nuts and olive oil, less fatty content, right? Less red meat. A glass of wine is allowed in there, not a bottle of wine. I know all of you are laughing, yeah. See, you can tell who drinks bottles of wine by the reaction to that. A glass of wine, red wine. And then, it's more so to a lifestyle in terms of doing that in combination with exercise. Physical inactivity kills people. Physical inactivity kills you. How can I prove that? Yes, I can. How? Physical inactivity is basically you not doing any kind of vigorous activity, okay? Or any type of moderate activity, which I'll get to and I'll explain what those are. And by not doing that, your life expectancy has been decreased by almost 30 to 50%. So think about it. Another way to think about it is if I lose weight by 5% or 10% of my desired goal, so if I just want to lose 5% of my weight, I have to do something active to achieve that. And by doing so, I can decrease my death rate by a significant amount, by 30 to 50%. So what defines physical activity? And why does Mississippi rank as number one in physical inactivity? Is it something we're not doing on the school level? Is it something we're not doing in our jobs? Is it something that we don't promote as a community? I know we do promote it in this church. I can walk into this church and know the things that are being promoted. Absolutely. So the question is, how do we make this contagious to our community members? So physical inactivity, and I'm just going to read some of the statistics that are very, very salient to this talk. If you can do the following, you can decrease your rates of heart attacks. If you walk 30 minutes a day, you decrease your rates of heart attacks by 50%, 50. Okay? If you have physical activity that is vigorous 1 to 2 times a week, and what does that include? If you walk, race walk, if you jog, if you run, if you swim laps, if you do intense gardening, if you play tennis, singles, not doubles, if you climb up a hill, if you bike 10 miles an hour or faster, if you do jump rope, if you, I mentioned aerobic dancing, if you can do any of those, and you do it 1 to 2 times a week, right? You can decrease your rate of heart attacks by 80%. If you do that 3 to 4 times a week, you decrease it by 90%. And if you do it 5 to 6 times a week, 98%. 5 to 6 times a week. I just tell y'all, exercise for 150 minutes a week. 150 minutes a week. Just do something. Not just walk around Walmart now, but something vigorous. Well, the number one excuse is I have no time. Right? How many of you have no time? Raise your hands. Come on, Gina. No time. You know, it's funny. I actually looked at this. Amy raised her hand. Well, that's because she has a boss that makes her work all the time. Right, Amy? Is that true? Yeah, that's true. So here's my thing. Do you have 89 minutes of free time in a day? 89 minutes of free time in a day. Raise your hand if you don't have 89 minutes of free time in a day. 89 minutes of free time. So what's that? Jonathan, that's an hour, almost an hour and a half, right? Just an hour and a half of free time in a day. No? The average American has 89 minutes of free time in a day. Okay? All I ask is maybe just take 25 minutes of that time. Or 30 minutes. Can we pull that off? Okay? So 30 minutes at that time, let's multiply it by 5 days a week. Alright? And then do some activity. We're talking about reduction by 90% of heart attacks, right? Isn't that cheaper than 5 medicines prescribed by Dr. Fakaridi? Right? Okay. Hey, we're in church now. It's the truth. Isn't that cheaper than coming to see me and your blood pressure is high because you're stressed out from all the things that we just talked about in terms of, we have this weather we have to deal with. Y'all going to walk in my office and you're going to be thinking about the next thing that has to happen, the bills that have to be paid, and then you walk into the front desk and they're like, well, here's your copay for this, and you got to pay that, and you still got to go buy stuff afterwards, right? Hey, prevention is better than cure. There's a way to avoid my office. Get that 25, 30 minutes in. I'm just having the truth. This is, truth serum, right? True talk, as they said. So let us consider that in terms of not only prevention and taking ownership of your health, but it's also economic savings. That money is saved. If you have high blood pressure and you're a little bit obese, there's something called sleep apnea, which is where you have difficulty with, sleeping, getting 6 hours or 8 hours of sleep, and you feel tired still, you're snoring a lot, you call the hogs all night, waking up your partner, right? And then you're falling asleep when people are talking to you during the day, and you feel tired. If you get a sleep study and they realize that you just need some oxygen called CPAP, which is a machine you take at night, then you can sleep better. You have enough oxygen going to all your organs so that you can function better, you can exercise better, you can lose that 5 to 10% weight, then your sugar levels will drop, your weight will drop, and then you come off of 3 of your medicines and you save a lot more than money, right? You gain life. Because most people who have sleep apnea die in their sleep. They die from irregular heart rhythms, heart failure. Some of them will have strokes, and they don't even know it. We hear about it in church on Sunday. Some so-and-so didn't wake up. Some of them had sleep apnea that was undiagnosed for a long time. So knowing your weight is important. It's called your BMI. If you're overweight, that's something we have to address, and I've addressed a lot of that in everything I've talked about so far. The other thing that we need to talk about is some of our diets, eating processed foods and salt and sugar. I'm going to stick on sugar because sugar is the new tobacco. Sugar is the new tobacco. I'm not talking about people who just only smoke, because most people, I didn't know this until I went down south, most people actually don't smoke. They dip, they chew, they vape, right? Like that combination is the same outcome as someone who smokes. I don't know if you know this, a woman who smokes 1 cigarette a day increases your chances of having a coronary heart event by over 100%. And your chances of a stroke is about 46%. So 1 cigarette versus 20 cigarettes, it doesn't matter. Y'all gonna have a heart event or you're gonna have a stroke. It's gonna happen. So when my patients walk in and say, I'm just kind of down, doc. No. You don't get any sympathy from me. 1 versus 20, the same. Just quit it, however form it is. Because that will increase your blood pressure, that causes the narrowing of your blood vessels, increases it by 2-fold, meaning twice. Your life expectancy is decreased by 8 years by being a smoker or having nicotine exposure. 8 years. So the way I get people to quit or to make a decision is I tell them to grab the most important person in their lives and bring them to the office or look at them in the mirror and tell them that I'd rather continue smoking this cigarette or this pack of cigarettes than spending 8 years of quality time with you. If you cannot do that, you gotta quit. If you can do that, I will never bother you again. So that is a conversation that we have to have with our community members, because that is another preventable cause of death. The dietary risk is one, nicotine exposure is another one. So those are very important things that I have little time to waste in terms of trying to get people to get there, because we need to get there fast. We can prevent bad outcomes. Getting a second opinion is something I like to talk about in this setting too. When you are told about a condition that you know is going to have an effect, not only on you, but your family. For instance, if they tell you have to be on dialysis, the things that you have to understand, people who go on dialysis, dialysis is not the long-term solution. Like, am I getting a kidney transplant? You know, what are my options? So if the doctor is not having those options to long-term solutions, or how we can prevent us from getting to dialysis in the first place, you need to seek a second opinion. If someone is talking to you about having a heart procedure, and they don't tell you what the risks and the benefits are, you seek a second opinion. If you got someone who tells you that, listen, you got a gangrene on your foot, or you have a wound on your foot, and we just got to chop off that foot without restoring circulation. Now, we're in the amputation mecca, so all of y'all can relate to this, right? Because all y'all know someone who's had this done. Where they chop off your foot without shooting dye down the leg to see how far the arteries are going down the foot. Maybe we can unclog most of these arteries that get to the foot. And so maybe before they chop off your knee and below, maybe we can just only lose one toe. If I lose one toe, guess what? I am still functional. The day you make me non-functional, in 8 years I'm dead. 8 years from the day you take off that leg, I am dead. 2, the cost to your family is about $500,000 till the day you die. Now, the average Mississippian makes about $40,000 a year, $37,000 to $40,000 a year. How can we afford that? That's why the majority of people are dead in terms of their life expectancy years ahead. Tunica should not have a life expectancy of 68 years old for an African American male. Should not. But that is the current status. You know, Madison County doesn't share that outcome, right? So there are differences even within a 2-hour drive as to how long and how the benefits of healthcare that people get. Not only do our churches have to be invested in this, our hospitals have to do more of community outreach to explain this. But you know, I challenge them to do that. It's not all about what people can bring to you, it's what you can do for people to get healthier. All right? So seeking a second opinion is very, very important, because that can not only save a limb or a life, but it also can give you an idea as to what the right way and quality care that a patient should receive over just access to care. There's access to care and access to quality care. All right? So in my office, we have, you know, just people from different backgrounds and people who come from, you know, both Mississippi and outside Mississippi. And one thing that I value is, you know, the comfort level that we have discussing this very important topic. And this topic is who are included in all the research trials that are done for the heart and vascular standpoint when it comes to ethnic, racial, and some of the demographics that are included in these trials. So women are excluded in a lot of cardiovascular trials. I don't know if y'all know this, but all the heart attack trials that have been done, only about 30% have included women. So you saw this medicine that pop up? Yeah, only about 30% have included women. Minorities, also African Americans, right? We make up 15% of the population. Only less than 5% have been included in all cardiovascular trials. All. Less than 5%. Hispanics are actually worse. 16% or 20% of the population, only less than 1% have been included in all the trials. So that has to change. And how do we change that? We have to encourage our youth of all genders and all, you know, all colors and backgrounds to get involved and become scientists. It's not just sports anymore. You can't just say, I want to be this, LeBron James or, the next Kevin Durant or the next Tom Brady. Like, no, we need y'all to become the next scientist and go to school and become the next researcher or accountant or business person. Understand economics, understand healthcare, understand policy. You have to go and change and effect change in your communities. And that's something we need to preach. Now, that will take more than just this talk tonight. That is bringing all our community activists and our legislation all in one room to come up with solutions. So my advice is that we'll sit here and talk about healthcare, but healthcare is not just on its own silo. It's interconnected with other sectors. And those sectors all determine all the systemic policies and the distribution of wealth and distribution of money in terms of what we're going to focus on. And healthcare has to be paramount in the Delta. But how do we attract doctors to the Delta? You're attracted by actually becoming strong and boisterous that we want better quality, we want younger, and I'm going to say this, we want younger doctors in here. And let me tell you why I said we want younger. The average cardiologist in America now is about 55 to 60 years old. Over 50%. How does that affect everyone? In about 15 years to 20 years, most of these guys are going to be, gals are going to be retired. So if we're seeing our health trajectories going up in terms of all the bad outcomes, and we haven't seen what the rest of the country is seeing in terms of reduction in heart and vascular death rates, which in some places are like 30% reduction in heart and vascular outcomes. We haven't seen that here. How are we going to get all these doctors here? We have to incentivize them to come. Something has to give. They can't just all park themselves in Memphis and Oxford and Jackson, right? Because what's the cost to go there? All right? So just food for thought. Well, I think I've said enough for one night. Diet, did I miss anything from a diet standpoint? I think I covered Mediterranean diet, yeah. I like to kind of open the mic up to get feedback from you all as to questions, because I can go on and on. But I want to thank you for the privilege of invitation. I want to thank you for being awesome listeners. We can have a follow-up to this session and break down all these topics one by one. But just get involved and take care of yourselves. Diet and exercise. It's as simple as that. Let's start there. And we'll lead to a better, not only Mississippi Delta, but I think overall a better healthcare for the country. Because what impacts us here impacts other communities that look and reflect this community as well. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I've already had 2 heart attacks, 3 strokes.
Okay. What age when were you the first
The
one?
first heart attack, I was 32.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, I was 34.
Yes, ma'am.
The strokes I had, I was 56
Mm-hmm.
when I had them.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, now I
Was your blood pressure controlled the whole time?
My blood pressure, I don't really have the blood pressure, but the medicine I take for my seizures runs my blood pressure sky high.
Okay.
So I don't really have blood pressure, but with taking the seizure medicine, it gives me the high blood pressure.
But did they tell you that was the cause of your heart attack and that when you were 30? You said 30? How old were you?
32.
Yeah, 32. When you see a young woman have a heart event in their 30s, especially in their 30s, the things that I look at are, one, I exclude, because right now we're sending young 30-year-olds for surgery, heart surgery, not just stent, heart surgery, like to cut them open, because of either 2 things. One is for strong family history, and 2 is nicotine, smoking. So I need to make sure that was not a factor with you.
My father had a massive heart attack.
At what age?
Daddy died at 50.
Yeah, so she has a strong family history. So that is why things like your cholesterol and aggressively dropping your cholesterol, especially your bad cholesterol, LDL, is something that was very pertinent to you. And two, people don't know that 50% of the time, if you've had a heart event, you're gonna have a stroke. 80% of the time, if you've had a heart event, you're gonna have poor circulation in the legs. So those are things that have to be checked, kind of like all the systems with you. And I get the whole medications and having a compound effect. I think that is secondary. Primary, I think in your case, was genetic. And you are, you know, what I call someone that needs to be very, very attentively addressed when it comes to anything relative to your heart or your brain or your legs. Like, you need to be addressed aggressively because of your strong family history. So cholesterol medicines you're taking and other medicines that we know that could prolong your lives, you should be on. All right? What else? Yes, sir.
I don't know this. 2015, I had 4 bypass.
Wow.
And they didn't never know, they checked me out. They never find my heart was black. I had 1 red spot. The only way they know my heart was bad, I kept passing out this side here to do a new stress test.
Yes, sir.
And all the years that my heart was bad, I said, ain't nobody do it but God. Tell me how come they couldn't find it?
That's a God question. You know, you're right. You know, I always tell people there's certain things that I can tell you. There's subtle symptoms for heart events, right? Some people passing out was the key for people to know that you were having something wrong, right? You said you passed out.
The only way is I passed out twice.
Yeah.
And my wife and daughter said there's something wrong with her.
Hey.
Came up here to hospital.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Women and men present differently, FYI, if you're having a heart event. Men, typical chest pain, crushing chest pain, go radius to their jaw, their arm. Some people will have feel short of breath when they walk, but men usually chest pain. Women, they feel tired, fatigued. They'll say, you know what, I just stuck, you know, there's something off. I just feel I get tired really easy. I can't walk down there without getting short-winded. Sometimes when they talk, they get, you know, short-winded talking. You know, we call that conversational dyspnea. And then they will get dizzy. Some people get dizzy. Some people pass out, some people don't. It all depends on where.
In my situation,
Yes, sir.
I never got tired,
Right,
never came short of breath,
right.
none of that.
But you passed out.
And I guess
Yeah, you passed out.
one, twice.
Yeah, passing out is one of them. So that's a very serious one. When you pass out, that means one of the major arteries in your heart is blocked, if it's related to your heart. If. You know, not everyone who passes out has blockages in their heart, but if you pass out and we do find blockages in the heart, it wasn't a small vessel. That's a big vessel that went down. And usually it's either multiple stents or bypass those people will need. So in your case though, we're lucky you passed out and we revived you, or you woke up. Most people who pass out, who have catastrophic heart events, never wake up.
But both times.
Right. So that's why I said we thank God for that.
I woke up, then I just couldn't remember how come I passed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When I woke up, going and do everything I wanted, they everything could keep.
Yes, sir.
But they got tired of it, she said, no, something gonna have to happen.
Right. And you passing out, you were not a diabetic at the time, correct?
I never been diabetic.
Good. All right. That's something, when people pass out, always check their sugars, FYI. Some people can pass out because of sugars too. Just a little hint. Everyone needs to learn CPR in this room if you have not learned it. CPR, learn it. That's something that people die here too, from just people who pass out and they watch them and they don't know how to do CPR. Every family member should learn how to do CPR in case someone else passes out. All right, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have had 2 total knee replacements.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, there was one in 2009 and one in 2016. But the one in 2016, they discovered that I had some blood clots in my, right up under my kneecap. And now I'm on, the Relto.
Yes, sir.
And they asking me, well, didn't you know you had the blood clots? I mean, how did you get the blood clots? Was it because of the surgery or, because I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question. No one ever explained it to you? So the risk factors for clots, there's a term we use when people have either stasis or surgery. So meaning that if you are immobilized for a long time in a car, or if you've had recent surgery or trauma, okay, or if you have a malignancy or cancer, those are risk factors for clots in the veins, all right? And so in your case, out of those three, you had surgery. Yeah, so knee surgery, that's why most people have knee surgery and they have all these major surgeries, hip surgeries, they'll put them on kind of blood thinners for a while. That's the only thing I can attribute to. If you had, there's a way to see if that clot was new or old at the time. So if they did the ultrasound.
No, and then on top of that, they put a IVC
Filter. Yeah. Is it because you were bleeding, or maybe the wound hadn't healed, so they didn't want to put you on blood thinners to make you bleed more? That might be the case. But IVC filters can be removed if done within 6 months of inserting them. Right? They can be taken out. So I don't know if they took yours out. No.
They could get stuck.
It got stuck. I'm sorry. Yeah. So after they were on blood thinners, after certain months, they can take you off of it. And the fact that you have a blood IVC filter is protected if they missed anything. An IVC filter prevents a clot from going from your legs to your lungs. And the new ones are safe. Back in the day, they had old ones. They're complex. So in your case, I think surgery was the culprit there. Yes, ma'am. So who else? Any questions? All right. Oh, Jonathan. Anyway.
What are some signs and symptoms that people usually have for peripheral artery disease?
Right. Yeah. So people who have poor circulation, peripheral arterial disease, we call it also silent disease. Anyone who's had any pain when you're walking, any burning, or any numbness or tingling, either at rest or with the activity. When your leg gives out when you walk, when you look at your feet and you feel that one feet is cooler than the other, when you feel that the hair growth on your legs are not growing at all, and that one feet is darker than another, when you feel like it's burning and you're rubbing alcohol on your feet, when you're told you had the gout for many years, but it ain't working, and they put you on aspirin or Plavix, right? When you're told that you have arthritis, especially people who are older, but you have risk factors, and these risk factors are if you're a diabetic, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and if you've had heart blockages or if you had a stroke, you should be screened for poor circulation. In addition, is with your toenails, if they're very thick and they turn yellow, like that color, you should be screened for poor circulation. Patients who have non-healing wounds or ulcers on their legs should be screened for poor circulation in their legs. It's important because if you don't get screened and you get caught in the late stages, majority of the time, especially around the delta, 90% of the time they will amputate your legs. And 90% of the time it's preventable. There are procedures we can do that are minimally invasive to go and fix that. Just like a roto-rooter, you go and unclog that pipe in your kitchen sink, we can do that to the legs and you're fine and you go home 2 hours after. That can be done to prevent you from losing your limbs. As I just stated, the economic and clinical consequence of this is very costly to you and your family. So you don't want to become a statistic. Knowing that 1 in 3 African Americans are more likely to get peripheral arterial disease than any other race out there. And knowing that Mississippi ranks #1 in amputation rates. So that's something that we need to have at least have the intuition and the knowledge to go and ask to be screened with an ultrasound of your legs. That's the ultrasound of the arteries, not the veins, the arteries of your legs. Those are the things that have to be checked out.
Do you do that?
Yeah, we do that in our office, yes ma'am. Absolutely. 20 million people have this term called peripheral arterial disease, but only about 12% of the population have been screened at all or treated. That means there's a lot of people out there who have it, who have not been captured. There's a lack of awareness. Only 3 out of 4 Americans 3 out of 4 Americans have never heard of poor circulation peripheral arterial disease, but they've heard of heart attacks and strokes. And more people have this than that.
Is there anything else you can take for your heart besides that, Entresto?
Yeah, Entresto is interesting because Entresto is when the heart gets really, really weak. And then we put people on Entresto. So the things that you can take for your heart, when you talk about prevention, those are different. Like, so, I tell people it all depends on what we call your pooled risk calculation score. There's a score if you're between the ages of 40 and 79 that we calculate your cholesterol level and other factors that you have and your sugar levels, and then we can tell you what your risks are in terms of if you need to be on cholesterol-lowering medicines or take a baby aspirin or things like that. I can't stand here and tell you to start taking this medicine without knowing each of your individual risks. So that has to be calculated by a heart and vascular specialist, okay? And in terms of if you do have a weak heart, there are medicines that are life-saving, like Entresto, that we put on patients to make their heart beat stronger. So not everyone should be on Entresto. It all depends on your heart pump function and if it's weaker below a certain amount or a certain percentage.
What is the heart rate normal?
Normal heart rate, yeah, we like normal heart rate between 60 and 80.
60 and 80?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything above the what?
Well, anything above is different. Everything above is just different because it might be above for different reasons. For instance, any woman who's anemic, if your blood counts are low, right? Your heart rate might be faster because your oxygen level in your blood is not as rich as it should be. So your heart rate will go higher to tell your body that, hey, I'm going fast so that I can catch up and increase flow to your heart and all the blood vessels. That is compensating. So the heart rate is basically a way to tell us what else is going on with your body. When you have an infection, even as simple as a UTI, your heart rate can go up. When you have an allergic reaction, when you take certain medicines, albuterol, any of you that use albuterol, your heart rate goes up. That's just your body responding to things. But usually it should be between 60 to 80. Yes, ma'am. Questions? Yes, sir.
Can you ever get off of diabetes?
Can you ever get off of diabetes medicines, you mean? If you eat right, you lose weight. I mean, yes, you can come off of medicines, but you will forever be a diabetic. So your numbers can be controlled, but you will forever be labeled a diabetic, like you've had the history of diabetes, all right? Right, so you'll have the history of diabetes, but that number is just basically the number we look at. It's called the hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of protein, sugar that sits on a protein in your blood. So that's why we draw your blood and send it out, and it measures actually the sugar on that protein, called the A1C. And that number, if it's between 5.7 and 6.4, you are pre-diabetic. If it's above the 6.4, you are diabetic, all right? So when you say, can you ever become a non-diabetic? Yeah, if your A1C was 6.4 and you died, exercised, and you lost all this weight, and it went to 5.6, so you're off the map. Yeah, you're doing great. Continue to do those things, but you're not going to have to be on medicines. Now, on your chart, it'll say you have a history of diabetes because you were at one point at 6.4, but you treated yourself and you did right. Now, if that number keeps on going up to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, you have to send it to go see a sugar specialist called an endocrinologist who has to now put you on the right medicines or see your primary to put you on the right medicines. So that all varies in terms of where you are on that list, in terms of that range as a pre-diabetic or a diabetic. Diabetes is something I take very seriously. Both my parents are diabetic, so I am very passionate about this topic. All right? And it's something that we can be very aggressive about.
What about if it's 7? You said.
Yo, you gotta come down. We're going down to 5. You gotta bring that down to 5.6, 5.7. All right? I'm not gonna settle for 6. You can do it. All right? You love the what? Tell it. Yep. You love the cookies. Yep. Tell it. Tell it. Pop soda too? Why don't you just start drinking water? Just cut all that out and just drink water. Let's see what happens to your numbers next time I come. I promise you it'll be different.
I had a heart attack in 2000.
Oh, wow.
I was at work. I thought I had a heart attack. Now they were sit down, I had to pull off my shoe, cause my feet had got real hot.
Yeah.
And I laid on the floor, cause I thought the floor been more cooler, cause I thought I had hot. But I ended up, I had a heart attack.
Wow.
And they took me down to ER, and then by the time I made it there, they said I had a heart attack. And they were gonna fly me to Jackson.
Yes, sir.
Then when I went to Jackson, they said I had two
Yes, sir.
and they put
Make
two
sense.
stents.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now I'm taking, blood thermal.
Yes, sir.
They said my, cholesterol was high.
Yeah.
I'm taking 3 pills.
Good. That's good. That's for someone with a heart attack. That's not bad at all. And first of all, we thank God that you're fine, and you know you need to get. So you need to now get checked frequently, like stress tests.
I'm going down this month.
Good. Get ultrasounds of your heart. Get a stress test. Make sure, just like a car, how we change the oils every 3 months. You have to get checked up. All right. And 2, hot flashes. I like the fact that you brought that up because women who are premenopausal versus postmenopausal, you know, sometimes you get all these symptoms and you get ignored. You know, your estrogen protects you from heart disease. It's protective. And as we get into that perimenopause at a time and postmenopause, like you start losing that protective effect of estrogen. And some people will say hot flashes is just, oh, you know what, it's just menopause, ignore it. No. Sweating and feeling hot and all that. That's why I said women are different. You have to be taken seriously. All right? Because even that period increases your chances of having a heart event. It actually starts rising after that period. So that's why, you know, back in the days, you all could eat whatever you want and get away with it, but as you get there, you lose that effect. So most heart attacks in women will start occurring during that time period. And 2 is make sure you check your thyroid level. Every woman in this room, check your thyroid. Make sure your thyroid is okay. That's something that you have to have checked at some point.
So when I go back to the doctor, I just tell them to check my thyroid?
Your thyroid, yeah, just make sure it's been checked if it hasn't been checked before. Okay? All right. Good. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, y'all. God bless. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the evening, okay? Appreciate it.